my name is Alan Meeuws. I'm an architect in Microsoft Services, MCS as it was before, I believe. And I work in the Center of Excellence for Modern Devices and Mobility. What I do together with the team we're architects that go to large enterprise customers usually to help them with deployment or architecting a solution. For me, that means solutions around Windows devices and usually mobile devices. Phones are kind of the area that I've been working in for the last 8 years, I believe, for Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for nearly 20 years. And Wim there is from Belgium. I am from Belgium too originally, but I'm living in America for 16 or 17 years now, working for Microsoft. I'm going to talk about Windows 10 for mobile devices. When we put up these titles, we decided to go for Windows 10 for mobile devices because we hadn't officially announced Windows Mobile as the name of the product. It's Windows 10 Mobile. And Windows 10 Mobile is for phones and for small tablets like these 6, 7, 8-inch type of tablets. Windows 10 for mobile or mobile will be available for ARM as well as for Intel processors. You should look at it as not having a start menu, but a start screen. It does not have a desktop. It does not allow you to run Win32 apps. What else is a big differences here? It does have a phone functionality, obviously, right? Which the desktop version of Windows 10 will not have. So those are the main differences. It's really built for mobile devices as such. Now, when I talk about it, who went to a Windows 10 session apart from the keynote? Probably 50%. You're going to hear a lot of stuff that you probably already have heard in some of these sessions. Because although I'm talking about Windows 10 Mobile, it is the same operating system. It has some different functionality because of the type of devices it will be running on, right? But it is the same operating system. It has a lot of the same functionality that you find in desktop, and I'll talk more about that as we go through this session. The goal of this session, for me, is to show you what we are doing in the operating system to be able to support a scenario, a bring-your-own scenario, right? That's the goal of the system. Is everybody in the right session? Looks like it. All right, great. So we know the world is changing, and the workforce of today, the younger workforce of today that I clearly don't belong to, right? Want to have all kinds of mobile devices, want to be able to work from anywhere, want to be able to use all kinds of apps, want to bring their own diversity of systems. And obviously, the diversity is sometimes a real challenge. When I talk to enterprise customers and they want to support Bring Your Own, one of the biggest challenges is what devices are we going to allow? There are many, many devices, iOS, Android, Windows-based devices, all kinds of models, all kinds of functionalities, sometimes very unpredictable. So it's sometimes very staggering. How do you support all that diversity within your network? Obviously, everyone tries to scare you for all the hackers out there, right? That are not just script hackers, but that are real people that want to damage companies, organizations of all kinds. And you should be scared. I'm scared too. But on the other side, if you're working in an IT organization or you're responsible for certain functions in the IT organization, you need to move on, right? You need to be ready for this scary world. And all these mobile devices, they seem to be a very easy target to try to hack and get into the network, right? specifically also because with the Bring Your Own, the question is, are they really managed? How well are they defended? Are there viruses? Can we trust these devices? So there's all kinds of questions around this from a security perspective. And then, your business people obviously want to move forward, right? If you are in a division that sells trains or planes or food or whatever to the customers from your organization, or you're an educational institution and the educational staff, I think they call them, right? They want to do certain things with their students and with other ones, right? They want to move forward. They want to take this modern technology, and they ask the IT people to make it happen. So lots of challenges with mobility and Bring Your Own. I think I'm kind of opening a door that has been already open for a while. Here the cloud is going around. But anyway, in this cloud and devices world, right, key things, key challenges that we need to answer is, how do we authenticate users? What identities do we use? These are Bring Your Own devices, so they belong to somebody else, right? How do we handle that? How do we focus at protecting the data, the stuff that sits in applications that people access with browsers, documents from Office, etc.? How do we protect that content, that data that sits on these devices? Because once they bring them in, connect them to your corporate network, they're going to try to get stuff to go home with, so to speak, and not in a bad way. The intent of most people is to be more productive and be able to do things while they are using their personal mobile device as such, right? How do you prove that it's actually a trustworthy device and that you can actually have it connected and make sure that you can follow what's going on and manage all those apps that are on there, not just the apps from the person who the phone or the tablet belongs to, but also your apps that you may want to install on these devices. So let's start with identity. A Microsoft identity, it's all about AD, right? Active Directory is where a lot of you are using it as an identity infrastructure that is used for authentication, for certificates, for all kinds of information that is controlled through your network as such. Now, there are lots of challenges with identity as they exist today, right? The passwords are the most weakest point. It's the user. You depend on the user to create a password. They need to create it in such a way that it is a secure, complex password, but mostly the users don't like complex passwords. When you look at Windows devices, Windows 8.1 devices, phone, tablets, etc., there is the requirement to have an MSA, right? A Microsoft Live ID, as we used to call it, to activate that device, to be able to access the App Store, and all kinds of services are depending on an MSA. How many of you use a spreadsheet to keep track of MSAs that are on Windows phones? No one? I'm with a good crowd. There are lots of people that, especially if they want to control those phones, and if it's about corporate-owned phones that a corporation or the organization buys for employees and agents, right? They want to activate the phone with an MSA, and the MSA is basically, from a Microsoft perspective, a consumer identity, an identity used by the consumer to activate their phone or their device, and it's out of control of the organization. So they try to keep track with that with spreadsheets and all kinds of other database solutions. So to solve this, we're introducing Passport. If you have been to a Windows 10 session, certainly somebody has mentioned Passport, right? Today, if you are, who's using the Windows 10 preview today? At least 50%. If you use the Windows 10 preview today on phone as well as on a desktop or an Intel-based system, right? Install it and you add an MSA to it, you add that account to that system, you will be already using Passport. Right? Passport wants to replace the password, because passwords are the weakest link in the security in terms of authentication. They're usually not very well secured from a user's perspective. Right? I've seen many 3M sticker notes or whoever makes them on monitors, under keyboards, etc. in terms of passwords. And very often passwords are available on the internet in large quantities for all kinds of email accounts, etc. from hackers and so forth. It's a really weak link when it comes to security and authentication, if you want. We're going to replace passwords with a key pair. I'm going to add to that immediately. You can also use certificates if you are already using certificates for authentication. But basically, if you do an MSA, that's not a certificate, we do a key pair. I'll explain exactly how it works, but basically the device, when the user authenticates against an identity provider, such as Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, will generate a key, a private key, and a public key, and say to the server, this is my public key. It works like a PKI infrastructure, right? By exchanging encrypted pieces, the server knows, yes, this is actually the user that we were talking about and that I am supposed to know as Alan Mears, right? Based on the public key that a directory got from me and the private key that I'm holding, because I can unencrypt whatever the server is sending to me. In general, this mechanism is well known and understood by IT people, and for users, when there is not a big hurdle of using it, and that's where we introduce Windows Hello, right? Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It's very easy for them to use. It's not very complex, and they feel comfortable doing that. Most of users are doing it already today, right? Using some kind of PIN or password to unlock a phone or a tablet or a fingerprint, those kind of things people have been using, and they know about it, and it's comfortable. There will be a choice of identity providers. Obviously, Microsoft is delivering AD and Azure AD, right, as identity providers, but this is based on the FIDO standard. So you'll see identity providers delivered by Google, by Facebook, by banks, there's a lot of people in the world that are participating in FIDO and will have directories that support this mechanism of the key pair mechanism of authenticating users. And I'll go again over how the mechanism specifically works. So what's important here is that the private key never leaves the user. The private key is never sent over the network. The public key, right, is very well known. It's in the directory. Everybody can basically see it. But the private key stays on the device and never leaves the device, which is different from a password. But in one form or the other, a password will go over the network, right, and be shared with somebody. If you log in, you will be sharing a hash of a password with a directory, for example, and authenticate with that hash. That's no longer done with this mechanism as such. So it's really well protected. From Windows device perspective, it is protected in the TPM. Now, we know in the consumer world, not all devices have TPMs. All Windows phones have one, right? They all have a TPM. It's a required certification piece for OEMs to build a Windows phone to have a TPM 2.0. There's lots more phones or PCs that have TPMs today, and the PCs that are being built, or the tablets, like this little Stream 7 from HP, right? has a SOC, and the SOC firmware, the UEFI firmware, has a built-in TPM on the device. So TPMs are becoming more and more available, and we also recommend using them as such. Users will be unlocking their device with what we call a gesture, right? And that's what we call, when it's about BIO, we call it a Windows Hello. So Windows Hello is the mechanism in Windows. That's why we call it Windows Hello, right? It's not generic password. It's only available on Windows. Other vendors may have it on their operating system. Google may come in Android with the same, and probably already has for some Android devices, biometric pieces, right? Apple too. And they call it something else for their operating system. So it uses fingerprint or face recognition or iris eye to unlock the device. The device will recognize you. I think Joe Belfiore did in the keynote, showed how we walked by a PC or close to a PC, and the PC with camera and infrared recognition saw that it actually was Joe Belfiore, recognized him, and unlocked the device for him, right? And it's integrated. We do a lot of work to make sure that there are no false positives or false rejections, right? People don't like rejections, but false positives are also not very good. So we use, and that's why in most cases, for facial recognition, for example, there will be a need for new hardware, new devices. Not all current devices support that because they don't have the infrared and they don't have the right camera to be able to recognize somebody without creating a false positive as such, right? So that you cannot use photographs, etc., to authenticate against a PC, let's say, or a mobile device. Obviously, there is still PIN and password, and obviously you'll be able to manage the authentication or the unlock mechanism for the user for what you require as a company. So it's a bring your own device. You can manage and change the way the user unlocks the device. If they don't have a secure way, or they just use 4 PIN digits, right? And you want 6, like it's required at Microsoft, you can change it from 4 to 6, and they will have to recreate their PIN or re-enter the PIN that they have. If they are using 1111 or 1397, right? You can make that more complex, and you can eliminate those types of patterns if you want, so that it is a more secure authentication mechanism that you will want to implement within your organization. So how does it work? As I said, today, it already works for MSAs, right? And it's already available in Azure Active Directory. Is anybody experimenting or trying or really in production with Azure Active Directory? At least a few, 4, 5, 6 people. But how does it work? You have an identity provider, an IDP, right? Azure Active Directory. I grayed out Active Directory, and the reason I grayed out Active Directory is because mobile devices are not domain joined devices. When I said in the beginning, Windows 10 Mobile is a mobile SKU, if you want, of the operating system. It won't allow you to join it to an Active Directory domain and apply group policies to it, right? It's always internet connected, never domain connected. Now, I'm not saying that if you use a tablet like this and you install the desktop version of Windows 10 on a tablet like this, you will not be able to join it to a domain. Yes, you can join it to the domain. But if a new device like this comes to market with a mobile SKU on it, it won't be able to be joined to a domain, right? Even if it's an Intel-based device. So there are some differences between the operating system in terms of functionality from a SKU perspective, as we say, right? So you have an Active Directory or an Azure Active Directory, an identity provider. The user will authenticate himself, right? when I used this one and I used my Live ID, I used the previously provided password or that I created with this device to authenticate against the new identity provider with my MSA. I had two-step authentication already enabled for my Live ID, so I needed to enter an additional PIN 2 to do that. But most users won't have that necessarily with a MSA or a Live ID, right? But they authenticate against this identity provider, and they, if it's an org identity provider, such as Azure Active Directory, not a MSA, not a Live ID, that you have created for them, you can add an additional layer of authentication, not just their regular Active Directory account, but you can say, when I want a one-time PIN additionally, or I want a phone call like phone factor that calls the user and asks the users for a single PIN or other authentication mechanism, those kind of things, right? You can add an additional layer for the initial authentication as well as later on if you want more security on top of that too. So at that point in time, when they authenticate successfully against the server, a key pair is generated on the device for the user to be using, and the user shares the public key with this identity provider in the cloud or in the network that they want to authenticate against in the future. Right? In the future, they will be now authenticating by signing an authentication request, sending it to the server. The server says, yes, I know this person. It is signed with the right public key, and send something back to the user that's encrypted with a public key, and the user will unencrypt that and send it back to the server. You know, it's a normal back and forth for a PKI type of authentication. So the user will unlock this identity by unlocking his device, right? In a desktop world, you will also be able to use your phone to unlock your desktop. But the secret that you have on your phone, because you're using the same identity on the phone that on a desktop, the desktop will see your phone and will be able to be unlocked with your phone, for example. Those scenarios exist too. But the user will unlock his identity by using a PIN. When a user has multiple devices, he will have multiple key pairs, right? The desktop key pair is different from the phone key pair, from the tablet key pair. So if the user loses one device and the key pair is expired by the server, by you, using Azure Active Directory, he will still be, or she will still be able to log in from other devices using a different key pair. The Active Directory or Azure Active Directory will keep multiple public keys for the user, and the user will have multiple private keys on the device. Again, you can replace that if you're certificate-based and you're already using. You don't have to use key pairs. You can use certificates, but basically works with the same mechanisms, right? So when the user authenticates, they get an authentication token, right? That token is binded to the device, so it cannot be shared again, right? No pass the hash. It is binded to the device. It's specific for that device, for the user. Cannot be passed to another device, so that another device would be able to use the same authentication token to log in to another server, because obviously you have third-party relying servers. Take a SharePoint server or an Exchange server or whatever application somewhere out there that trusts this identity provider and says, yes, I trust you. Yes, you have an authentication token. I'm going to give you an access token for this service, and you can now access that token for the service. Access token will expire. You can set it on your relying party how long an access token can live, right? Could be a week or a day or a few hours, depending on how you want to see it. And then the user can use the service, can sync his email, can access a SharePoint, or what have you. Questions? guess I was clear. I hope, anyway.
Actually, I have a question.
Yes, go.
I realize we have Active Directory blocked out, and you need Azure Active Directory. Is there any way to manage these devices offline, not utilizing cloud services at all?
Not use cloud service? Yes, there's a way to do some of this. And you're talking about, for example, I don't know, a point of sales terminal or a handheld device or those kind of scenarios? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that, or as well just as any organization that can't,
Yeah.
because of regulations or what have you.
Yeah, I have a slide on what infrastructure do you need and what if you want a cloud only, a hybrid solution, or which would be an Active Directory federation solution, right? Or a on-premises solution only, right? I'll cover that in a minute. All right. Other questions? There's one there.
Check the device if there any software like Keylog or any other thing that I grab the Windows identity.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any software that checks?
Is there a health manifest for that device? Is that basically a question? Is this a healthy device before I give it an identity and allow the user to use this device, right?
Firmware is correct because you have TPM, but is there any, for example, driver they block?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, there are a number of that. Yes, and I'll cover the health service that we have. We also, what's the right word? Even after living 18 years in the US, I sometimes don't know the English word for things, but I'll come to it. There's also, we also know a lot about TPMs. When the key pair is generated, it's generated in the TPM, protected by the TPM, right? There's no other process that can get access to that private key, which is critical to do any type of authentication as such. And we, I'm going to get to the word, we knows much about these TPMs and can actually attestate, that is the word, right? We attestate that this is a non-spoofed TPM, so to speak, not a false TPM or something like that, that is actually created in, I don't know, software by a driver or something like that, so that we knew this is a trustworthy device from that perspective. And then together with an MDM system, but obviously this is connected to a mobile device system too, or in most cases will be connected to a mobile device system, right? You can do additional health reporting on the device. And I'll talk a little bit about that in one of the next slides. But yes, it's important to know that this device is a trustworthy device, right? Whenever you create that. I do a session on security, and I'll talk through the full security architecture, which we don't have time for right now, but our code is secure UEFI-based devices only, fully Microsoft signed code, so you can't run a third-party driver that is not gone through that process. So it builds up from that space, so it's an attested device that will be running a Windows 10 build from a mobile perspective as such. Yes.
Apart from Microsoft, and on top the provider, the special provider settings. And, is this the same in Windows 10?
So in Windows 10, we inherit from a security perspective what we have with Windows Phone 8, 8.1, which is a UEFI firmware that cannot be changed with an operating system that is, there is a key database in the UEFI software that has hashes of images that can be run on a secure UEFI system, just like on the desktop, right? And will only run those images that are securely signed by Microsoft. So all the code that runs on a Lumia device or a Samsung Windows device or an HTC Windows device goes all through the Microsoft signing fabric, if you want, right? Factory, before it is actually brought to any device and then delivered to the user. Yes, an MDM system, and I have a slide on that, can the user in certain circumstances. Let me see how many slides forward this is. And I'll go back. Now you have seen the full deck. Right? So at a certain point in time, you may actually request if a device is healthy, right? At a certain point in time. And if you request, or your service, or your third-party relying service, request the device, well, I know you have a token, but I'm not sure I can trust you, right? What is your health status? At that point in time, the device goes back to Azure AD or to the identity provider, and the MDM, in this case, in my slide, it's Windows Intune, requests a health report from those services and then sends that health report back to the third-party relying service to tell them, yes, I'm healthy, I have the right identity, I can now use your service, right? Because in certain circumstances, you want to check the health of the device to make sure before you give them access to a certain service. And that same mechanism is actually used whenever the first time a device is authenticated or an authentication key pair is created with the identity provider. The same health plan will be provided based on what is known from the device at that point in time. In most cases, the phone is not going to be managed yet. It's a bring your own phone. An identity is created, but we know some things about the phone and about the UFI database and about the TPM, and we attestate that before we actually allow the device to create the identity and authenticate.
The sign code is every time checked when I start the device with the application.
When you start the device, when you boot the device, all the components, all the executables, all the DLLs, etc., have been signed, and those checksums are indeed checked at that point in time. When the device keeps running, we will use the cache of that checksum before we actually, but we refresh the cache of the checksum every so many times.
Can I solve the process in the process?
Can you?
When the
You really need to come to my security session. But in the boot process, you cannot insert an additional service within the operating system that is not signed, and the operating system doesn't know. Right? An unknown process cannot be started in the boot process. The phone would blue screen if that happens, right? So we do checksum whenever the system is booted. The same today with Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1, by the way. So I'm going to escape and go back up because we were here, right? So we have an identity, we authenticate. Now, how does the identity get on the phone? The identity also can also be get on the phone through a provisioning system. We have a new tool which is called and it's the wrong name for it. It's provisioning, not imaging, but the tool is called Image Configuration Designer. It's part of the ADK. You can download it already today for multiple versions of the public versions of Windows 10. And with the Image Configuration Designer, you can create a enrollment in Azure Active Directory as well as in MDM. You can do a lot more with the Image Configuration Designer. I'm going to call it ICD because otherwise I'm going to struggle with the word, the full presentation. But you can bootstrap a device to easily be connected to your corporate infrastructure, create the identity, and create a base configuration set that you want on the device, right? It's a flexible method. It creates a package that has XML and other elements in it that you can put on a USB drive, you can put on a PC, a kiosk, for example, that the user can go by. It can be initiated with NFC tag so that it immediately connects the user to the right cloud storage or server storage, etc. It can be added to an email and sent to the user, and so the user can actually enroll his device in the Azure Active Directory as well as the mobile device management system. When the system is fully ready and you enroll in Azure Active Directory, you can have a number of policies set automatically by Azure Active Directory and also enroll the device automatically in a mobile device management system. Doesn't have to be Windows Intune. We like it to be Windows Intune, but I need to call it Intune, right? Microsoft Intune. But it can also be AirWatch or Mobile Iron or Citrix or other partners working today with us on integrating this new identity infrastructure in their tools and connecting with that if it's about Windows mobile devices. So in a bring your own device scenario, the user will actually mostly have an MSA on the device or a live ID. Will then get an Azure Active Directory by registering his device to Azure Active Directory as such. As a result, the device is now registered in Active Directory and it's a trusted device, and the user can now start to be enrolled in a mobile device management system, get additional policies, get additional applications, get additional configuration sets for VPN, etc., right? In a bring your own device environment, the user setting will be roaming using the Microsoft account, not with the Azure Active Directory account, right? Settings such as the color of the start tiles and whatever, first or favorites in the browser, those kind of things, they can migrate or they can roam across multiple devices that the user is using this Microsoft account, right? When you do a corporate liable scenario, right, you can immediately activate the device using an Azure Active Directory environment. And then in that case, everything will be under control of your own Azure Active Directory and mobile device management environment. You will have everything registered there. Roaming will be done over the Azure or the Azure cloud for you. So all the settings will be between the corporate devices that this user is using. You can allow a user to add a live ID or a Microsoft account, but it's not needed, right? It's a corporate liable scenario only. You can do things like, because Cortana, for example, at this point in time is consumer only and depends on a Microsoft account to know something about the user and search preferences and those kind of things that are the attractive part of Cortana. I'm not saying that will stay like that forever, but at this point, this is something that can only be enabled using the Microsoft account. We have a lot more control over the device using a corporate liable scenario, obviously, than a bring your own scenario. But even in a bring your own scenario, you will know things about the user, and in some cases you will not that you don't want to know, depending on legislation, etc., or on privacy in your country or in the region that you live, or those kind of things, right? Because you will be able to see which applications the user is installing from the market, from the store, etc. In both cases, applications can be installed from the store using the Azure account, right? The Azure AD account becomes an account that can log into the Microsoft App Store, and users can install apps with that account. I'll cover that in more details in a minute. So from an infrastructure, and you had a question before, right? What do I do if I have an on-premises solution only? So in an Azure AD situation, you'll need an Azure AD subscription. Base subscription, I believe, is free, right? And for key pair-based authentication. If you want to do cert-based authentication, you also need a PKI infrastructure and Intune to be able to do that, obviously, because you need now certificates, right, to do authentication. If you have a hybrid solution, right, whereby you have an Azure AD and an AD, and you use ADFS, or AD Connect, I believe, which is going to be released soon for synchronization between your AD on-premises AD as well as your Azure AD, you'll be able to do that using a base Azure subscription and then ADFS with passport key right back so that you actually have the keys in your AD too, right? Not just in your Azure AD. And for with cert-based, again, PKI infrastructure and System Center Configuration Manager with Intune for this hybrid setup where you connect Intune with your System Center such. And on an on-premises only solution, you need AD domain services, version 10, so server vNext, right? With ADFS server vNext. And why do you need ADFS here? Because you're not federating with Azure AD, because as the gentleman asked there, we need to attestate some of the devices and the infrastructure on the devices from a TPM perspective, etc., to be able to create these keys, right? Yes?
Question about the AD, is that ADS 10, is that the force functional level or just the domain controller that can process the
Domain controller, yes. And there is a schema change you want to make plan for. Okay? So data protection. So protecting the data on the we have now a secure identity on the device. How do we protect data? A big investment for Windows 10 is to provide what we call internally, and it's an internal name, I'm not sure it's going to stay like that, Enterprise Data Protection, EDP. That's how we call it internally, the technology that is there, right? It provides what we think a user-friendly way of protecting data on the device. And when you have what we call enlightened application that knows about data protection, it's going to work easier than with those applications that don't know about it. And I'll explain in a minute what that actually means from a deployment perspective. EDP is also supported on other platforms through IRM or through viewers, because this is all about encrypting the data. Obviously, we have full device encryption with BitLocker, those kind of things on phone and mobile devices, which generally encrypts all the storage on the device. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about any data that leaves your organization and is being stored on a device is going to be automatically encrypted. When we generate a key pair between the device and the user, there is also a key generated that can be shared between the multiple devices that the user is using to encrypt at a file or record level data that the user is using. And that is what EDP actually is, right? So when this key pair is generated and an authentication core code is generated, there is a number of policies that the MDM system, and here's where you're required to connect this identity provider with an MDM system to set policies on the device, right? The MDM system will generate the keys, because in this case, the keys need to be shared, right? The keys need to leave the device. If the user is encrypting something with an encryption key on his device and then shares it somewhere, somebody needs to have the key to decrypt it as such. If the user is doing it on multiple devices, right, desktop and a phone, they need to have the same encryption keys to be able to unencrypt that information. So the MDM system is now in charge of managing those keys for encryption as such, right? You'll be able to set applications that are allowed and non-allowed, applications that can access the information, or applications that cannot access it. So bring your own device. You may not want the application, I call it, let's say, Dropbox, right? To have access to data, and so the user can store it on those data. So you can enable and disable applications to be using corporate data. The user can still have Dropbox on his device, And you store personal files, but not the enterprise files. You can set network and storage sources and targets so that the user can actually read information. And if it reads it from your corporate storage as such, it will automatically be encrypted the moment the user stores it on the device, right? And it could be that, again, he tries to store something on a non-compliant storage area, right? A Dropbox. You can allow the user to do that, but in that case, the file that he stores on Dropbox will be encrypted with his corporate encryption key. If somebody else goes to that Dropbox, or the user uses MSA at home to go to that Dropbox and try to read the file, he or she will not be able to read that file in Dropbox, because the other device, his personal device or his home PC, so to speak, doesn't have the keys to decrypt that information, right? So the MDM system will be able to set these types of policies to protect the information. There are also policies that you can, in certain circumstances, allow the users to do certain actions, but there will always be an auditable event in that case. I'll give you an example is, some people in your company may want to tweet, right? Because they have to do that. They are the social media manager, right? They have to tweet for your organization. They may copy something out of a document, a corporate-owned document, right? And tweet it. You may allow that type of action. In that case, the user will be prompted and say, it's your choice to do this. It will generate an auditable event that can be seen in the MDM server and can be followed, right? Obviously, question.
Sorry. And can I trust all applications, or is there wrapping or SDK what I use to?
So Microsoft Office, for example, Outlook, and the Microsoft applications are unlighted applications. They know about this. So which means that the Outlook on the phone can be used for personal email as well as for business email. And the Outlook application actually knows about EDS and will encrypt all the corporate stuff automatically with a corporate key, right? If you want to develop an application like that, the SDK for Windows 10 has all the API set to unlighten your application. So if you want your corporate application to be aware of this, right, and allow the user to use it for personal use as well as for business use, you can unlighten the application. Obviously, if you just target this application and light it up just as a business application, and the user can only use it for business users, right? The application will always encrypt everything automatically, right?
I use the SDK. I have no, for example, the wrapping process.
There's no wrapping needed. You, whenever, for example, you have an application that is being downloaded from the store and it is not unlighted, and you say, user, you can download this application, but it cannot be used for business purposes, right? You can whitelist applications for business purposes or blacklist them. But if you say it is a whitelisted application, it will never encrypt anything that is being used. Or if you say this is a business application, it will always be encrypt whatever is used.
I cannot use any app out of the store.
Say again?
I cannot use any apps of the Microsoft Store.
Yes, you can, but some of these apps will not be enlightened, will not know about EDP. Yes? So, and you can manage apps, which is my number 4 point on my slide of challenges. How do we manage apps, right? So, enterprise data protection, as you just point out, you have a number of apps that are in your corporate environment that always encrypt everything, and you have other apps that are not in the corporate bucket, so to speak, and do not encrypt everything. And you can decide which applications do what. Some applications can be in both because they're unlighted, right? And so they know about what is coming from the enterprise side versus what is coming from the consumer side. Some applications that don't know will always be in the consumer side until the developer adds the functionality to that application as such, right? Data exchange is controlled by you, right? You can say by application. This is my enterprise application, let's say Word, right? When somebody tries to copy something from Word to a non-unlighted or non-managed application, block it. Or allow it and create a auditable event. Right? So you can do both of. But you control what is being shared between the two, or the MDM system controls what is being shared between the two as such, right? So data is always isolated. You can allow sharing as such. Data is always encrypted on top of the BitLocker encryption, right? We will also encrypt at the file level or at the record level when it is specific, but on top of the BitLocker encryption, there is the data encryption as such. An API for third-party apps, which was what you asked, and MDM managed. So this is a screenshot. You see my design, not final UI. So this is a OneNote, right? Somebody copies something out of the OneNote and then opens another app, specifically Word in this case, and pastes it. At the point, here is a allow control policy, right? The user actually is allowed to do it, paste it anyway, or cancel the paste. If it's pasted anyway, the auditable event will be in the MDM server, and you will have visibility to what happened here.
Alan,
Yes.
on that. So the auditing has been mentioned in several presentations. Where is this audit being stored, and then how in real time is that information accessible?
Oh, it's not that there's a big light going off on your MDM server, like, doo, and so forth. Somebody's copying something. So it's stored in the MDM store at that point in time on the phone and synchronized with the MDM server. Timing of regular synchronization is up to you. You can set it with the MDM server on how many times events, etc. And not just events, also general MDM events need to be synchronized back to your MDM server. The more you do, the more battery you use, those kind of things, all considerations you need.
Is it also in the Windows event log?
Well, on the phone, it's on the phone. You won't have access to the event log. Let's put it that way. I don't know if it's in the event log. It's in the MDM store. The MDM client within the OMADM client within the operating system stores that information. It's in its private database and syncs it up with the MDM server. Right? On a mobile device, the OS version that I'm talking about, you do not have access to an event log. Not like on a desktop. If it's on a desktop, I'm actually not sure if it's in the event log. I need to check on that. Because this is also supported on desktops, right? In addition, you also have EDP controls over the VPN. You have per app VPN, enlightened app or non-enlightened app. You can check out whenever a VPN needs to be brought up. You can have VPN always on if you want all the traffic to be checked while you have that. And again, it's all MDM based as such. Third-party VPN tools. The mobile version of the OS doesn't support direct access, but supports IPsec VPN as well as SSL VPN. So, and the mechanism it works, it is a store-based plugin mechanism. We have a VPN infrastructure that you manage, and you can download a VPN plugin, as we call it, or an app from the store, right, using an MDM system, pushing it to the device, configure it properly for the user. And that could be Juniper or Cisco or all the other vendors that F5, what have you, that are out there. Policies. We have a ton of policies. You can provision a device, right, from an early stage, bootstrap it, make sure it's integrated with Active Directory using with the MDM. You have additional inventory and event type of information that is being shared with your MDM system that you can look at. You have an extended set of policies that are some of them also context-based, such, right, time, place-based, those kind of things. With the MDM system, you can distribute certificates and renew certificates. You can create Wi-Fi profiles, VPN profiles, email provisioning, SharePoint access provisioning, all those kind of things are available from the MDM client as such. And you can configure devices as kiosks or handheld devices. So the same SKU, operating system, supports as well retail phones as handheld types of devices. And then you can manage a store, and I'll cover that in a minute, as well as remotely wipe, remotely pin, remotely find. We have also a theft infrastructure now on Windows mobile devices for when devices are stolen so that they cannot be reset and resold, right? You can block that type of functionality and find them from your MDM system. As well as partially wipe, right? When it's a bring your own device, you can remove all the certificates, keys, documents that are within your corporate environment and wipe them from the device and return the device to its original state as the user brought it into the company and wanted to use it. So we clearly covered that. So when a third-party relying resource wants a health report, right, and wants to know exactly what the health status of the device is, the device will automatically request it from the IDP or the Azure Active Directory usually, and Intune or the MDM system that is being used, and then send it back to the third-party relying party before access is given through that service, being it a web service or another business app, etc., for example, right? Applications is also a big change in Windows 10, also for mobile devices. With Windows 8, we had a Windows Store, right, where users could buy applications using their MSA or download applications using their Live ID MSA infrastructure. We also had what we call the company portal or your private catalog. Your MDM system could have a catalog of apps that are getting installed on these mobile devices through the MDM system. You could develop those apps yourself. You could deep link to the store if you wanted, but you had no or nearly zero control over the actual store environment as such, right? The consumer environment or whatever was the store. So what we are adding now is a business store. It's a store in the store concept. It means that you can go as an IT administrator or a buyer into the Microsoft Store, log in, register, and buy applications or select applications if they are $0, but we still call that buying, right? Select them for your users and add them to a section, the Contoso section, right? Or whatever the name of your organization is, so that users from their app, from their store app on their phone can now download those applications without having to buy those applications. If you say, I want to buy, I don't know what, app that is 99 cents for all my users, you can have a licensing agreement with that vendor through our business store, and all the users can then download that app onto their mobile device without having to buy the device. If they bring your own scenario, the user leaves the organization, you can retract that license from the user and use it for another user as such, right? So we also have the license management in this environment. So the business store is basically a web interface, and that enables you to go in. You sign in with your Azure Active Directory as an IT administrator, right? You acquire the apps, and you create a private store or section within the Microsoft Windows Store for the users. The users, they log into their device using their Azure Active Directory, right? Authenticate against the store, open the store app, and can now download and install those apps from the store directly without you having to manage the apps any further. The store will update the apps if a new version becomes available, etc., and you have control over those licenses. From an infrastructure perspective, it's purely cloud-based, right? It's all based on Azure Active Directory and the authentication mechanism that we talked about. You don't need anything on premises to do this. The store is just hosted in the Microsoft Store for you, and the users go there to get those apps using the Store app on their device. You can also create your own line of business apps and submit them to the store and add them to your business store in the Microsoft Windows Store, so that the Microsoft Windows Store manages your apps and updates for your apps from that store environment, if you wish to do that, right? If you say, no, I want more an on-premises solution, right? We do the same thing. You can log in with Azure Active Directory into a business portal or the business store. Again, acquire all the apps that you want for your users and add them to your MDM system. You can even download these apps to a local server and add them to a provisioning package with the ICD that I talked about before. So you can download them and service them offline to devices. So in the case of the gentleman here that said, I want an on-premise solution only, right? You can download them and service them locally through an MDM system or through a provisioning package as such. So from an infrastructure perspective, it's cloud-based in the sense that you need to go in the store, purchase the apps, etc., and download them or add them to your MDM system. But the MDM system can be fully on-premises only, right? There are offers out there for on-premise MDM systems as such. Once an app is installed, and you downloaded it, or you have provisioned it using an MDM system, it will also automatically update from the Windows Store as such. Unless you don't want that, and you want to manage it, then you can block the updates from the Windows Store. Again, download new versions of the app, provision them through your MDM system, if that is your preferred way of working with this. So you have a lot of more control over how apps are being distributed to your environment. And then, obviously, from a licensing perspective, if you license applications and the user leaves the organization, you deprovision the device from your organization, no longer MDM enrolled, no longer you do an enterprise wipe of the device, right? These apps will be removed, and if the user leaves without you being able to do the enterprise wipe as such, the apps will be delicensed. So the device will check on a regular basis if the license is still valid that is on the device. If not, the apps will stop working. The same thing happens when they deprovision or they leave the organization and for some reason they never connect to the network again, so to speak, right, to any network. Also the data or secured with EDP will no longer be available to them because the keys will expire too. They will no longer be able to decrypt the information that is in the data records and documents, etc., so that it's no longer available to them, right? That also covers the kind of stolen situation or lost situation of phones as such. But again, we also have a theft infrastructure now so that the device can be locked and blocked so that it cannot be reset, etc., by a finder and resold to a market, which should help a lot for stolen and found devices. So this is some screenshots of the store, right? You register with the store. It's a regular website on Microsoft.com. You authenticate using Azure Active Directory to this environment. You have a number of applications there available that you can choose from. Let's say you choose the PowerPoint, which is a center fold there, right? The preview for PowerPoint. You choose that. You acquire that app. As you can see, you will have options to do that online or offline, right? If you do offline, it will be, you can download the app package and then redistribute it using your MDM system, for example, as such, or provision it with a provisioning package. So when you buy it, you obviously get a confirmation of that. And then if you store it in your business portal, it's going to be visible to you as an application that has a certain license associated with this that you can be using. Once users are starting to download it from the store in the store environment, you will see how many users are using it. When they do it from an MDM system, you will see in the MDM system how many users are using it on what devices and those kind of things. All right? So we covered identity with Passport and Windows Hello, right? We covered the ability to protect content and information using EDP or Enterprise Data Protection, as well as manage the device and making sure it's a healthy device. We covered how you control apps in a bring your own environment as well as in a company-controlled environment. Enabling a lot more of the scenarios required for Windows mobile devices, right, like phones as well as smaller tablets in the world. More questions? Feedback? Go ahead.
Once you enable apps for the store, it's all users see everything you enable, or is there a way to have groups?
That's actually a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I believe you can have groups of people, especially in the MDM scenario, right? Where you have a business store as such. You can also create groups in Azure Active Directory and attribute groups to applications. So my answer is, without knowing for 100% sure, I think you have these possibilities, yes, to create groups and associate applications with groups of users. Other questions? Feedback? You can download, obviously, Windows 10 for phone as well as for desktop, etc. today. You can also download the tools that I was talking about, like the ICD from dev.microsoft.com, where you can see the new ADK. The ICD is part of the ADK for those people who are familiar with desktop deployment tools. It's part of that, and you can try it out, create packages, see how complex these packages can be. And this is the ICD, right? I can create a new provisioning package. Let's go just take the value here. I can choose Windows Phone or Windows Common. So I can also use it for desktop, obviously. And then I'm going to take the default location. So it's going to create, in this case, a Windows Phone package. I can do certificates with it. First run commands. I can add applications to this package. I can do all kinds of enroll in the device management, set folders that they can access, create a login, create a ton of policies, right, that are available for you to configure. Define the shell, the start screen, and the system tray, which apps need to be shown there, what color they need to be using, those kind of things. So you can create a package that completely defines the phone. If you don't want to use an MDM system, right, but you want to use a secure identity, you can still use provisioning packages like these to require the users to use a secure identity system and authenticate against your services and create a provisioning package to configure their phone, deploy it to all the phones, and then you have a poor man's MDM system, so to speak, right? Because it's just an offline tool. You create this one package and you deploy it with an SD card or from a server, or you have a PC that you connected with a USB cable, and you pick up the package, drop it on the PC apps that opens on the PC, right, and it will apply to the device. You can do pre-enrollment of devices if they're not bring your own, but they're company-owned. You can do multiple devices at a time using a USB connection. So it's a powerful tool to configure a Windows mobile device and set all kinds of policies. You can also add content, right, like Word documents or an application database, for example, so it doesn't require a big synchronization for a big database that you want on a mobile device. All that can be added in a provisioning package and then deployed to a mobile device as such.
Hey,
Yes?
I'm just thinking about looking at the user-centric as opposed to device-centric.
Right.
So a user may have, let's just make one up here, a BYO device, a corporate-owned device, mobiles, and then a desktop,
Mm-hmm.
a tablet.
Yeah, 3 devices.
So is there a single view of that user and what he has? And I'm also thinking of in terms of the whole term earlier, the notifications, or I'm sorry, the alerts if the person is violated the copy paste rule there, to see what he's done across all those devices.
Yes, but in that case, you need a mobile device management system, right?
All through the MDM.
Yes. A desktop can be managed now with a mobile device management system, such as Windows Intune or third-party mobile device manager. Use exactly the same infrastructure as a phone, right? So policies can be set through MDM. They don't need to be set through a group policy, etc. And your registration of the devices in the MDM system shows you which devices are enrolled, right? If I give you an example of an Azure Active Directory here, which I created, right? It's called, it's my alias, that's how it's called. A very simple Active Directory with 4 users, right? You see here that Augusto has actually this device that's enrolled in the system as such, and I can get more information. I need to use a mouse, I think, here. About the device and the activities that the user is doing. Shows me, but I think I need to enable AD Premium for that. But I can see this, right? What the user's profile is, etc. At the same time, I also have an MDM system. In this case, that is Windows Intune. The same user is here. Under groups, okay, let's try to run the dedicate. I've done this before, so it's going to do this pretty quickly. Right, I have all the users, and here they are. So the same Augusto is here, of course. I see when he logged in, what devices he has. Right, the properties of that device. So these things are clearly linked together, right? If I go to devices and I see the managed devices here, where's Augusto's device? It's the same Stream 7. Here it is. I can see alerts that come in, right? Copy, paste, that kind of stuff. What hardware is using, what applications are being installed. Nothing is on the device. It's just a very simple thing, right? And what policies are applied? None, I think. No. He needs to have a password on the device, those kind of things. So yes, so you have an overview. Usually it's an MDM system. In your Azure Active Directory, you can see who is registered and what devices they're using, and that replicates to your MDM system. And then in the MDM system, you have the ability to drill down on the policies, the apps, the hardware they are using, all those kind of things. If he was using multiple devices, you would see that he's using a phone and a tablet and a desktop. If that all is enrolled in the same MDM system, you will have an overview of that. If you use System Center in a hybrid way with Windows Intune, for example, you would have that view within your Configuration Manager System Center console, because it will pull all the information from the cloud into the System Center Configuration Manager console and have the inventory there. And you could even then have domain joint devices used by that user that you would have visibility to, as well as mobile devices that are actually connected through the cloud to your environment. Other questions? Time for a beer and dinner? All right, thank you very much. Don't forget to do evals.